Today our author is Peter Sagal, presenting the book of Vice, Very Naughty Things and How to Do Them. It's been on sale for about a year now, but Peter's in the Bay Area, thought he'd stop by. And the quote that I picked out that was talked about this book is, somewhere somebody is having more fun than you are, or so everybody believes. Peter Sagal, a mild-mannered, Harvard-educated NPR host, the man who put the second L in vanilla, decided to find out if it's true. So this book will cover the many vices that one sees in society, as well as why people get into them, what drives them across these boundaries, and what exactly defines a vice. But instead of talking about the book, which I'll let Peter do, I wanted to talk a little bit about him, because the quote that he threw out to confirm this was that I live a vanilla life because I'm a vanilla guy. But if you know anything about his background, he's actually gotten into some nefarious or somewhat nefarious acts as well. He is a writer, a playwright, screenwriter, essayist. He's wrote for a number of very popular newspapers and magazines. And, of course, the host of NPR's game show, Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me, syndicated on most nationwide NPR programs or stations on Saturdays. But he is also the ghostwriter for a former adult film impresario, or as Terry Gross put it, a porn director, which, I think starts to classify you. Granted, it was their biography. It starts to classify you as getting into Vice, a staff writer for a motorcycle magazine, Step Closer, and an extra in a Michael Jackson video, which I'm pretty sure qualifies as some sort of vice. I'm not really sure what. And then finally, he was the screenwriter for a play called Cuba Mine, but that became, without his knowledge, the basis for Dirty Dancing 2, Havana Night. Again, if it's not a vice, it probably should be. So you can find out more about Peter at his blog, or at a site, petersagal.com, where you can feed his blog. I'm sure there's all sorts of interesting posts coming out from there. And at the end, Mr. Sagal will be taking questions, but please do come up to the mics so our YouTube viewers can hear you. And, of course, if he gets 2 of the questions right, he'll win our prize, which is Eric Schmidt's voice on his answering machine. So, with that, please welcome Peter Sagal.
Hi, everybody. Hello, how are you, everybody? Googlers. I'm told that you guys actually, on occasion, use the adjective form googly. Is it that? I mean, and you use it unironically? So you'd say, so somebody would do something presumably corporate and evil, and you guys would say, that's not very googly. And you're nodding. I find that both encouraging and terrifying, but that basically is how I approach life in general. I have spoken to a lot of audiences. I have never spoken to one in which it seems like 40% have open laptops. And I'm simply going to assume that during my talk today, you're just going to be IMing your friends repeatedly things like, this guy's great, did you hear that? Honestly. Well, that was a good one, because otherwise I'll collapse. It is a pleasure to be here. There are 2 amazing things to me about my appearance here today. The first amazing thing is that when I was invited by Google to come here and spend an afternoon with you, my agent who received the request immediately asked, well, how much do you pay? And the answer was nothing. Amazing thing 1. Well, the subset amazing thing 1, well, will you pay for him to come out? No. It's like, well, look, Can't the 767 just fly low over Chicago and I'll grab on? I mean, come on, people. That's amazing thing 1. Amazing thing 2, I'm here anyway. And the reason I'm here is I'm sure why most of your guests come is because I use Gmail for my personal email. Google is my, of course, default search engine. I mean, and like everybody else, it's become my default everything. Now I just ask it questions, and it answers me, which is terrifying. I got here today from Oakland using Google Maps on my iPhone, and I just wanted to meet the people who are running my life. Thank you. for running my life relatively well. Things are okay right now. I'm in good health. And to beg you to use your powers for good. Because it is such immense power. You could set Google Maps to just tell everyone simultaneously to drive into San Francisco Bay. Really, honestly, wherever they are. You know, I'm in Newark, New Jersey. I need to get to Wilmington, Delaware. Just take the I-80 west across the East Road. And I swear to you, within a day, the bay would fill up. Don't do that. Please. There'll be nobody to buy ads. I was also, if I could humbly ask you to make sure that my blog gets a little higher on the search results. That's really up to you, but I just wanted to say that would be. If there's anybody out there who might want to do that, that would be great. I also wanted to tell you a true story, which is that I have 3 daughters who I occasionally talk about. And my oldest is now 5. She just had her 5th birthday. Her name is Willa. But it was about 3 years ago, so she's 2.5. And I'm in my home office typing away. And she comes in and she wants to sit in my chair and bang on my computer keyboard, and that's fine. And I walk away to go to the bathroom or something. I come back, and she is looking at a Google search results page for Willa. In other words, you know, Willa this, Willa Cather, Willa, I don't know how many other Willas there are. No hits for her yet, but I'm sure that will change. She was 2.5, and she had Googled herself. She's ego surfing before toilet training, which is vaguely terrifying. So you have another conversation. Apparently, she had learned to type her name. I did not know that. And of course, my search engine window was up. And be nice to her, I guess, is the only reason I'm saying the story. I'm here today to do a reading and talk about a little bit about my book. This book I published last year called The Book of Vice. My first book, given the birth pains, probably my only, but we'll see. I'm told that people who give birth eventually forget the pain and go back to it, so we'll see when that happens. What's odd about this book is it came out in October, and I did a lot of appearances and a lot of readings around the country and places where I went. And then I put it away and went back to doing the radio show and a lot of other things. And now I took it out to look at it, and what the hell kind of book is this, frankly? I honestly don't know exactly what I was up to. But as was said, the idea was I, like a lot of people, spent a lot of time wondering about what was going on out there. An excellent example of the sort of things that caused this wondering happened just this last spring, although it wasn't too late to get in the book, and that, of course, is the great case of Eliot Spitzer. And you may have heard about this. And Eliot Spitzer, as you know, governor of New York, caught using a prostitute. In fact, we were able on our show, Wait, Don't Tell Me, this is an exclusive, we found, because he was a very careful guy, his itemized receipt for the services that he received. Because, you know, he paid, what was it, like $2,500? And we were like, well, what do you pay? What do you get for $2,500? I mean, my God. And the itemized receipt, it broke down to, it was like $500 for typical, you know, standard services. $500 for saying, oh my God, you're so much more fun than Mario Cuomo ever was. And $1,500 for not laughing when he said, and now I'd like you to meet the lieutenant governor. But, okay, that was a test, actually. And I'll tell you what it was a test for in a minute. But the upshot of this was a lot of people wondered, $2,500 escort services, what are these people doing? Usually we only find out about it when they get caught. And this happens a lot. When they get caught, we talk about it on my radio show. So over the years, I developed a certain curiosity about what's going on. The curtain gets pulled back for a minute. And we get to go, it's my phone going off because I'm a clod. Excuse me for a second. Go away. I completely lost my train of thought. Damn me. What I was going to say is when the curtain gets pulled back, you get to find out a little bit about what's going on in these strange, arcane worlds. But then the curtain gets closed again. We move on, and you never really know. And I remained curious. And I do live a rather vanilla life these days with my wife and kids in suburban Chicago, so I decided to go find out. They say that you should write what you know. but my attitude was, well, I already know what I know. I want to write about what I don't know and want to go find out about. So in the course of pursuing this book, I did a lot of things that were sort of, shall we say, unusual for public radio anyway. I visited a swingers club with my wife, just to observe, just for research. I visited a porn set. I ate in an elaborately expensive restaurant and interviewed the chef. Various things. What was great about this was, well, hopefully I did find out a lot of things that I didn't otherwise know. But also, it was such an unpublic radio thing to do, which I needed to do a little bit. And so I would go on these public radio stations to interviews about the book. And then I'll say, so Peter, why were you interested in these subjects? Terry Gross did ask me the question, which she says is one of her favorite questions she's ever asked anybody, which is, tell me about the orgy room. And then I would do these commercial radio shows, and they were like, dude, what a great idea! So I've become a fan of the morning zoos. Anyway, there are various chapters in this book, swinging, gambling, casino gambling. But this is lunch, or lunchtime, and this is a workplace, so I think I'll stay away from the more R-rated material. You see, I made that little joke a little while ago, and I got a lot of, disapproving looks. So I was like, okay, go G-rated. But was I wrong? Am I wrong about that? Okay. I was trying to take your measure. I could do the. I'm getting a big thumbs up from this guy. This guy in the front with belts and suspenders. Thank you, sir, for confirming my stereotype. I appreciate that. I think he did that just for me. No, come on, you're my people. You're public radio people. I could do that. All right, hold on. All right. Who wants the? Because I don't go to X. I don't do that. Who wants R-rated? Who wants? Well, I can't do that, but if you do have your laptop open, I do know some search terms that'll get you there right away. Just to check, who wants G-rated? Nobody. All right. Actually, it's PG-13 because it's about mating displays. Mating displays? This guy's ready for anything. He's like, whatever. All right, so I'm going to go back. All right. I'll do the. I'll read you. Actually, weirdly enough, this Terry Gross down has been, I think, the most popular chapter in terms of people really wondering about how it works. And this is from the first chapter of the book, the chapter then, because you asked for it. And if you're watching on YouTube, they asked for it. This is about swinging. It's called Chapter 1, Swinging, or Dinner Party Has Gone Horribly Wrong. I was checking the time here. I started at 12:30, right? Okay. It is a truth universally acknowledged that when a couple at a swingers club announce that they are there merely to observe and not actually to swing, everybody loses interest in that couple pretty quickly. Research, said one young woman, her enthusiasm for further conversation with Beth and me shrinking and disappearing like that little point of light in old vacuum tube TVs. Research? Well, yeah, Beth and I had been assured by Ross and Rachel, owners of the Swingers Shack, and now I will paraphrase a footnote. All the names, including the name Swinger Shack, in this chapter are made up because, as I explained, these are real people who, in many cases, didn't know I was going to write about it, so I wanted to maintain that their anonymity. And it is a much better name than Swinger Shack, just so you know. A private invitation-only club for participants in what is called the lifestyle. That it would be just fine if we wanted only to observe, to talk to people. No pressure, we were told. It's actually much better than a bar, said Ross. And now I'll interrupt myself again and say that I asked the guy, what do you want me to use for your pseudonyms? And he said Ross and Rachel. And he had, because I was going to call them Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice, and they totally did not go for that. They said, that's not our image. So they wanted to be Ross and Rachel and the other two guys from Friends, Joey and Monica. So it's Ross and Rachel and Joey and Monica. And I'm like, okay, if that's your self-image, that's fine, man. All right. It's actually much better than a bar, said Ross, because at a bar, you know, there was anxiety, there were expectations you didn't necessarily want to meet. Here, everything was cool, laid back. We, the merely curious, could happily interface with the avidly active. Except the real difference between the swinger's shack and a bar is that at a bar, somebody you meet might just have come for a drink or to watch a game on TV. Here, you had to bring your own liquor on which you wrote your name with a Sharpie, and the only TV in the place was showing hardcore porn, adding a sometimes discomforting bass note of grunts and moans to the peas and carrots babble going on around us. No, with apologies to Ross's nice spread of Hershey Kisses and a $29.95 chocolate fountain, the only reason people came to the Swinger Shack was to get it on. Except for us, which we made clear as soon as we had to, which was pretty early in any conversation. And then our interlocutor's eyes would go vacant, and soon he or she would wander off to talk to somebody else. Or once a man indicated his boredom with us by idly reaching out and palpating his wife's breast. I don't blame them. This April night was the last party at the Swinger Shack, maybe for the summer, maybe for the year, maybe forever. There was no time to waste with people like me. But still, in a lifetime in which I've been to all kinds of sexual marketplaces, bars, parties, this was the first time that I was going to get ignored because I wouldn't put out. I had contacted Ross through his website asking for permission to come interview him, his friends, and his guests because of all the varieties of deviant behavior. The lifestyle seemed the most wholesome. In it, we are told, consenting adult couples, well, consent. The events at the Shack, like at almost every other club within the swinging community, are for the most part couples only, for various obvious and subtle reasons. And these couples have agreed that each partner can have sex with other people within whatever confines they've set for themselves and in each other's presence. It offers all the pleasure, security, safety, trust, and stability of monogamy without the monogamy. In fact, it sounded perfect, a model of what most men, and many women, would want from their sex lives. Not for nothing was Plato's Retreat, the swingers club of the 70s, named after the inventor of the eternal ideal. And of course, to my mind, it was utterly impossible. How could stable, happy marriages survive adultery as a hobby? We are told, via their occasional interviews in the press, that swingers or lifestylers or whatever are no different than you or me. They meet up to socialize, talk, drink, and dance with their good friends, old and new, and then they have sex with them, which makes me stop and consider the various good friends my wife and I have, and then consider how it would be if one of our suburban dinner parties ended with us removing our clothes and performing sexual acts, and I have to put my head between my knees and take deep breaths. Ross told me straight up that he had been the recipient of some bad press and was a little nervous about opening his club to a writer. We agreed, eventually, that I would first come and interview him and Rachel at the club, which was also their home, and then if everybody felt good about it, my wife and I, couples only, would attend one of their parties. I asked him via email, and it's all right if we're there merely to observe and not to participate? Absolutely, he replied. We encourage that. Nobody has to do anything they don't want to. No pressure at all. Although I looked up your picture online, I don't think you've got anything to worry about. Swinger humor. Let me just take a second quickly because because I didn't mark up this chapter because I didn't think you'd want to hear it, and now I need to make sure I don't go too long. Ross is a lawyer with his own private practice. Rachel, his wife and partner in life and avocation, is an accountant. It is a cliche, of course, but true nonetheless, that the people involved in the lifestyle are normal people, lawyers and accountants and teachers and cops. If you're a rock star, model, S&M enthusiast, or sex-crazed porn star, you don't need to go to invitation-only clubs to have sex with lots of other people, do you? Childless in their early 40s, Ross and Rachel had stumbled into swinging 9 years before, when a young woman of distant acquaintance and bent morals propositioned the both of them via a letter laying out various scenes and scenarios. Did it have bullet points, I wonder? Did it end sincerely yours? Ross, presumably, with his heart racing a bit, showed it to Rachel, prepared if she reacted negatively to say something like, yeah, isn't that awful? Yeah, I'll rip it up. No, I'll burn it. Have a lighter? But she did not. And the idea went from blueprint to actuality. The instigating woman went off to other unexpected propositions, and 9 years later, not only are Ross and Rachel actively swinging, but they've devoted their lives, their homes, and their public reputations to it. Their first version of the Swingers Shack was in a suburb. Swingers clubs tend to be suburban because that's where doctors, lawyers, teachers, and accountants tend to live, and was going along swimmingly when a neighbor dropped the proverbial dime on them, and the cops arrived, searchlights blazing, and we presume cop-like square jaws agape. A media storm followed, but no charges, of course, because as Ross pointed out to anyone who asked, he is a lawyer, remember, there's no law against inviting close friends to your house to engage in activities as old as life itself with other consenting couples, even if each couple paid $60 to cover expenses. Haven't you asked your friends to bring a covered dish or a six-pack of beer? And even if they had never met some of these close friends before they showed up with their $60, and even if the hosts had to do extensive background checks on their guests to make sure they weren't bringing a paid escort posing as their wife, because you know, people do. It's happened to most of us, I'm sure. Free from any threat of jail or fine, Ross and Rachel still had had enough. They sold their suburban home and bought a 2-story building along a major arterial street in the big city where, they say, they're never bothered by anyone. Here, nobody notices cars parked in the street every Saturday night, or loud music, or any other noises. In fact, they have a tenant in the upstairs apartment who's never noticed a thing. He just thinks we're popular, assumes Rachel. And the only cops who show up, like the two I met the night we paid our $60, are also guests of the house. Their parties have over time become popular and are well known among the swinging community, with some of the 30 to 40 couples attending each Saturday night coming from other cities and sometimes countries. In fact, Ross asserts, only half joking, with the airfare, hotel rooms, and taxi rides purchased by their guests, the Swingers Shack is an asset to the local economy. They had become sexual entrepreneurs through necessity, they explained. I was just thinking it's a little bit like Google. They just are creative on their own, and they end up making a profit from it. Or maybe not. They had become sexual entrepreneurs through necessity, they explained, or rather, Ross explained. Maybe it was just their different styles or the particular challenge of my tape recorder whirring in their faces. But Ross did most of the talking, and Rachel could hardly get a word in edgewise. First, in those days immediately following that instigating incident, they had tried the typical method to find other partners in play. And here I should say, I'll read you this footnote because I thought this was interesting. Play and playing are just the most favored of many euphemisms for sex among the swingers I met. In fact, they don't even like saying swinging, and they just hate swapping, which for them is a term that implies ownership. You swap baseball cards, not people. However, they do talk about full swap, which is intercourse with a person not your spouse, and soft swap, which is oral sex and other more mild forms of sexual activity. Did I just get one of those warnings on YouTube by saying that? So you have to say, this is a little... Okay, I've always wanted that, so great. That's right, man. I'm unsafe for children. In general, for a community of people who are really, really interested in sex, they are rather prim about their language. It may have been an attempt to spare my feelings. It might have also been that using the more familiar, profane terms for the activities they are so avidly interested in would make their interests seem vulgar. Or maybe they were just raised well. Anyway, back to the text. They tried to go online and, do personal ads. The online thing, Ross said, his voice dripping with regret for those wasted hours. You'd meet for drinks, and in the first 5 minutes you'd be like, I can't stand this son of a bitch, and then you're stuck there. It was so common, as assumed to be the rule, that the hey, let's try swinging thing was the man's idea. So many times you'd meet some nice couple in a hotel bar, and as soon as the idea of swapping more than restaurant recommendations came up, the woman would react with a kind of horror strangled in shock because her husband, who had arranged an evening of drinks with this interesting couple I met online, hadn't gotten around to mentioning exactly why he wanted to meet them in a hotel bar. Rachel said, you don't know if it's the guy, Ross interrupting. How it starts for almost every couple out there, the man is a threesome fantasy with another woman. We're all studs. We can all please more than one woman. In fact, Ross's objections to most of the guys they met this way seemed to arise from a sense that they were too much into making that fantasy real. As he put it, I get the feeling that the guy's trying to become like Wilt Chamberlain. Maybe Rachel doesn't pick up on it. If I get that sort of feeling, if I don't respect him, it's over. I asked if it ever happened the other way. If upon meeting a couple, the man met Ross's high standard for decency and honesty and non-Wilt Chamberlain-ness, but Rachel exercised a veto because she didn't care for the woman. Ross answered, for his wife, I don't think that's ever happened. Then I asked them if, in fact, jealousy ever came into it, if a swinging wife or husband might veto potential partners in play because their counterpart in the other couple was, in fact, Brad Pitt or Angelina Jolie, or if one's own partner was reacting as if they were. I guess, said Ross, but if you have an issue with jealousy, stop, get out. It's not a place for any sort of jealousy issues or any sort of relationship issues. Yeah, said Rachel, we counsel people. If you have any sort of issues whatever, said the man who opens his home one night a week to carefully vetted strangers, so he and his wife can have sex with some, or perhaps even eventually all of them, then this is not for you. So, let's say you want to attend a party at the Swingers Shack. First, you fill out a fairly elaborate application for Ross with your name, your address, your occupation, your history and the lifestyle, and the same for your partner or spouse. And he will check it out very carefully, all the way down to tracking down your online identity. He barred one hopeful couple because the wife sent an email from an account used by a professional escort. His main purpose in his background checks isn't, surprisingly, given his history, to foil any attempts to infiltrate the club by vice squads. He did recently turn down the application of 2 police officers who had pretended to be a small businessman and a grocery clerk, but not because they were cops. He blackballed them because they were both married to other people. There is no cheating allowed at the Swingers Shack. Ross wants guests who are heterosexual couples in long-term, stable, honest relationships. No first or second or third dates at the Shack. No gay men. And most important, no single men using a friendly female acquaintance as a golden ticket to the Bacchanal. In fact, as part of the application process, Rachel will insist on speaking to the woman on the phone just to make sure she is with the program. Single women are allowed in the club, and everybody salivates on the relatively rare occasions when they show up. But single men are the kryptonite of the lifestyle. Everybody fears them. Almost every club bars them. Partially, it's practicality. And then I make a reference to the Power Exchange Club here in San Francisco, with which I open the book. As my experience at the Power Exchange showed, since there are so many horny, unattached heterosexual men, if you opened your doors to them, they would overrun your place and eat all the candies and generally make a nuisance of themselves, like tribbles with erections. I knew this was the right crowd for that joke. Have you guys seen the remastered classic Star Trek? It's really good. Anyway, sorry. It's also, I think, one of many indications that despite many claims of this being a woman-centered scene, in the end, male preferences are the trump. Having a careful selection of polite, handsome, generous single men at an evening's party might make for a real treat for the woman in attendance. But to the men, while an array of sexual choices is a wonderful thing, it kind of loses its zing when the choice is someone else. I point out to Ross he takes painstaking care to make sure that every couple he invites to his club is committed, loving, open, and absolutely honest with each other. A true working marriage, so they can come here and have sex with other people. I don't see the irony, says Ross. So that's that section. And there's more of that if you are so inclined. Let me check the time. It's 1 o'clock. I'm here till 1:30. Let me quickly pick another section. Tell you what. Let me try to read you a little bit. I've never read this section aloud, and I thought this would be appropriate for this crowd. This is from my chapter on conspicuous consumption. And since I'm here in Silicon Valley, I thought that perhaps that would be an appropriate thing to do. Let me see if I can make sure it's just the right length. Give me just 1 second. Okay. Thorstein Veblen, a curmudgeonly Midwesterner himself, conceived of the theory of conspicuous consumption. One of those phrases that describes behavior that, like passive-aggressive whining, is something we readily see in others but never ascribe to ourselves. Veblen, a serious and respected economist, was reacting to the disparity between classical Adam Smithian economic theory, which holds that people act strictly in their own best interest, and thusly collectively in societies, and the Gilded Age society in which he found himself, in which a small but visible minority behaved in ways which, if they became widespread, would destroy Western civilization. He observed men like, to take but one of 1,000 available examples, Commodore Ned Green, the one-legged, debauched son of the infamous Hetty Green, one of the most parsimonious and wealthy misers who ever lived. The Commodore had a different view of economic theory than his mother, who wore severe black suits for years until they fell apart, perhaps because they were bought secondhand in the first place. The Commodore, by contrast, liked to keep his own blimp at his estate near Buzzards Bay. Deciding at one point that he would like to own the world's largest yacht, he tried to have it built, but the shipyards were busy with World War I. Frustrated, he then tried to purchase suitable vessels from the Morgan and Astor families, but they weren't selling. So he purchased a Great Lakes steamer. The 225-foot-long United States had it sawed in half and ordered 40 feet of deck length added to it. The finished yacht, which was either the largest in the world or formidable enough to sink any rival by ramming, sported 9 master suites, each with its own bathroom, and had a crew of 73 officers and seamen. Soon after the finished vessel was delivered to Buzzards Bay, it sank in 15 feet of water and lay there, askew and useless, like the detached tumescent penis of a bored giant. All right, maybe PG-13. Not only that, but Commodore Green also owned what may have been the world's only diamond-encrusted chamber pot, which, in his innate attitude toward the nature and source of his wealth, would send any Freudian into fits of ecstasy. Now, Veblen observed men like Green and Diamond Jim Brady and Commodore Cornelius Vanderbilt and John Betamillion Gates and James Gordon Bennett, who, among many other exploits, built the Newport, Rhode Island Casino Club just to spite another club in town that had refused him membership. Bennett, it is estimated by chronicler Lucius Beebe, squandered more than $40 million in his long life, for which he got nothing more material in return than a bad hangover. So Veblen asked, if economic theory predicts that everyone acts for his or her own benefit, purchasing goods at the best possible price and conserving resources as much as possible, then why in the world would anybody purchase a diamond-encrusted chamber pot? His answer was to ascribe a social benefit to such purposes, rather than economic one, although in his view, social and economic benefits were intertwined. If you eat with the big dogs, you get better kibble. Veblen, we now believe, was only partially right. He was correct in that the purchase of such frippery as diamond chamber pots, or to take a more current example, anything at all sold by the sharper image, has value only as a display of wealth, but he might have been short-sighted in assuming this behavior arose from strictly human social mores. There's evidence that displays of excess wealth go back far, far beyond the Neolithic age, and also that such wasteful behavior has more value than merely impressing the Joneses, or in Neolithic times, the Adolfisches, I guess. Richard Conniff, in his book The Natural History of the Rich, applies recent discoveries in developing theories of evolutionary biology to his personal observations of the wealthy. His theory that Veblen's conspicuous consumption is really a form of wasteful display, which for many decades was a puzzle to evolutionary biologists. The classic example is a peacock's tail. It's easy enough to surmise that a male peacock's tail serves to attract a female peacock, and thus helps to perpetuate the male's genome. But it gets trickier if you apply elementary Darwinism, which surmises that any adaptation to survive through the generations must bestow a survival advantage on the organism. Peacock's tails are enormous, ungainly, require a huge amount of energy to grow and carry around, and help keep the bird from effectively fleeing predators, or curious children, or me once at a Hawaiian luau where I had one too many Mai Tais, or 3 too many. Perhaps I too was engaged in wasteful display. The question is then, how could evolution, the survival of the fittest, allow such a ridiculously inefficient animal to live? Wouldn't a bird with a large, ungainly tail be dragged down and immobilized, like Dr. Seuss's bird Gertrude McFuzz, and eaten? If I were Dr. Seuss, that's how I would have ended it, which is why it's a good thing I'm not Dr. Seuss. Also, Sylvester McMonkey McBean would have given the Sneetches guns. How could any attribute so seemingly detrimental to an organism's physical survival flourish throughout a population? The answer in both cases lies in the theory of sexual selection, which arose when a clever biologist realized that it wasn't enough for an organism merely to survive, to reproduce. It also had to convince a member of the opposite sex to reproduce with it. I assume this insight came in a bar late on a Saturday night, when the biologist once again found himself sitting by himself with his notebook. Thus, one day, and forgive me, evolutionary biologists, I assume there are some here, for the caricature of how mutation actually works, a bird is born with a fantastically heavy and colorful tail. Other birds laugh at it, mock it, run circles around it, predict the bird's early demise when the coyotes arrive. But the chicks dig it. And here, of course, I mean chicks in the vernacular, not avian sense. Chicks mate with it, and more big-tailed birds are born. As long as the big tail maintains its appeal, the added attractiveness and thus matings outweigh the survival disadvantages, and the genes for the big tail will persevere and spread through succeeding generations. But the more perspicacious will ask, why would a big tail or a yellow beak or magnificent horns or a Lamborghini attract a female in the first place? Female organisms, like any other, want to propagate their own genes and aren't going to fall for any flashy young cock just because he provides his own sunshade. Cock, again, in the avian sense. There must be an advantage for them as well in picking mates who are so clearly wasting precious bodily resources on pointless displays. And the answer to that seems to be the waste itself. A female is looking to mate with the strongest, most hardy male around. She has limited time and limited input to choose from among the potential mates. Thus, in thousands of different species, males, and it's almost always the males, have evolved body parts, behavior, or other kinds of displays to show they have energy to burn. Peacock feathers, reindeer antlers, hummingbird mating displays, a room in a 100,000-square-foot mansion reserved solely for gift wrapping. The males sometimes exhaust or immobilize themselves, wasting their precious resources on the most gaudy displays possible, just to show females that they've got it to burn. A mature elk says to a female, "What? These 18-point antlers? Just picked them up on a lark, baby. Would have gone for 20, but you don't want to seem too nouveau, you know?" Which brings us fairly directly to eating gold. They serve it at the lodge at Pebble Beach, gold, foil, flecked abalone, foie gras, and truffles. Not in Jell-O, not yet, but that would be fun. There are bars such as Libation in New York where you can drink gold, chocolatiers where the gold wrapper is never meant to come off the bar, and at least one company, Easy Leaf Products, which sells edible precious metals for the home chef. The eating of gold might be the purest form of conspicuous consumption ever. For one thing, it's actual consumption. Down your gullet it goes. For another thing, unlike other forms of extravagance, it has no utility to justify even a fraction of its cost. A $600,000 by Tourbillon Bifuseau watch by Delacour may be a tremendous waste of money, but at least it tells time, and as an extra, the phases of the moon, which increases the justified fraction of its price up to at least $40. Gold-plated food is the closest polite society comes to actually lighting cigars with $100 bills. It has no utility, other than the exceptional valuable utility of showing you can afford it. Once you have successfully demonstrated your excess resources to your potential mate, you straddle her thorax and grasp her with your pedipalps, and then, oh wait, wrong species. But not by much. Thank you very much. Let me leave it there. Hello, satellite Google offices. Can the satellite Google offices wave to me? Okay, that's creepy. Whoa, I'm sorry. Okay, you know, it's funny. As was said, I wrote this book on the assumption that that most people like me are wondering why they're not having as much fun as they should have, and thus the book has lots of chapters on expensive things you can buy or eat or do otherwise. There is a long explanation of my history writing that memoir of a, I will say, faux porn impresario, and why I say faux is explained at some length in the book. But it occurs to me that idea that most people are sitting around thinking, why aren't I having as much fun as I should be, is not true of this particular audience. You have a ball pit right over there. How much more fun can you have? Anyway, nonetheless, thank you for your attention. It's my pleasure to be here, and I was wondering, I can happily take the rest of the time I have. If anybody has any questions for me, I'd be happy to take them about the book, about me, about the radio show, which I know is of great interest. Go ahead.
So I was curious, while you were doing this research, did you find any activities or pastimes that you decided actually were fun, were worth doing, and you're going to continue doing now that you're done with the book?
I get asked that question a lot, and I wish my answer was, yes, I'm now part of a polygamous commune. I have 4 wives. But the answer is no, with one exception. One of the things I discovered in this book is that, well, one of the many things, happy things about this book is I got to become friends with Nina Hartley, who is the world's coolest porn star. She is, maybe you've heard of her because she's had a fairly large public profile. She was in the cover of Newsweek once. And she's a very intelligent, sophisticated woman. And she explained to me that, in her belief, sexual orientation goes far beyond merely gay and straight. You have all kinds of predilections that are built into your wiring. And if you're not built that way, you're not going to enjoy any of these things anyway. And I found out that I'm not really wired for a lot of these particular pleasures, not just the sexual ones, but the other ones. However, I have become an addict of fine dining. One of the chapters in the book is about a visit to Grant Akatz's amazing restaurant, Alinea, where I spent more money on a meal than I ever had in my life, an amount of money that I thought was insane. I have since doubled it because you get into that world and it's just bizarre. So that's the one that if I have one new vice, it's that now I go and I spend far more money on meals than I ever thought I ever would.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yes, by the way, I don't know if you're aware of that. I'm bringing you this news. Other places in the world, you do pay for meals. Uncivilized, I know. Yes, sir.
Sorry, I had to miss most of the talk, but I'm curious.
It was great.
It was. Watch the video.
Okay. I think a bunch of people blogged about it during it, so you can check that out.
I'm curious how you research for Wait. I'm just sort of picturing, a bunch of Google alerts for a whole long list of words to do with sex.
No, that's at home. At work, no. The answer is, as you will be unsurprised, is that we research the show almost entirely in the internet. I read the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times on dead trees. Everything else we do in the show is internet. And we make use of the fact that there are a lot of people out there, some prominent like Fark.com, some less prominent like bloggers, who do a lot of our work for us. They comment, they find those odd news stories. There's a lot of commercial sites like Ananova.com. Your products are essential to our work, so thank you. We should give you a cut if we made any money. But basically, we have a staff of 5, down to 4 actually right now. I was about to say, if any of you would like a job, but my God, I don't think you'd like it. Anyway, I'm sorry, I distracted myself. Train of thought. We just sit around people have come and say, oh, we'd like to do a little, a news story about how you put together the show. And they come and they film us for 5 minutes all staring at a computer screen. And then they turn off the cameras and go away, because that's how we do it. And we compile huge lists of news stories. What I tell people is that if you hear our show, and on the show we play about 5 games with listeners, we ask about 4 questions to our panelists in the edited version of the show. For every question that you hear, we recorded maybe another, 50%. And then for every question we record, we write up another, 3 to 1. And then for every one we write up, we discuss another 10. And then for every one we discuss, we look at another 20. So just hundreds and hundreds of news stories. And then we just basically find the ones that we find amusing. And that's what goes into the show. I'd compare it to like watching a sausage being made, but I think that's comparatively really exciting.
Do you do the same kind of editing on the callers too? Is like the back and forth. Some parts are particularly funny. And
what we have found, what we have found in our show is not live. It's taped. In fact, it's taped in front of a live audience. And we're going to be doing it in February again. We come back to the Zellerbach Hall up in Berkeley. So come on up and see us. It's great fun. And we have discovered over the years that the show is better the more live it sounds. And because we used to try to, I'm a writer by background, so I would write these elaborate sketches and skits, more like The Daily Show does. And we found that that's just not our stuff. That what we do is improvisational. So we edit as little as possible. We edit for content. Sometimes things don't go wrong. We edit for time. But most of what you hear in our show is what actually happened on stage, however many, 24 hours before when you hear it. For example, did anybody hear, we did a show in Seattle about 2-3 weeks ago, and we started this thing about Clippy, the Microsoft icon.
It's good.
And for those who didn't hear it, what happened is we were doing a story about this apparently very famous email that Bill Gates sent, bitching about using the Microsoft website. And we talked about that, and we made some jokes about Microsoft, and then we just mentioned Clippy, and I think the line was, well, Clippy must die, haha. But then we started imagining the gangland execution of Clippy. And we just started riffing off each other, and we got to like Clippy saying, so, is that a personal grave or a business grave you're digging? Can I help? And I was literally doing this. I was pounding the podium, crying. I was laughing so hard. And we did not plan that. We did not write that. I don't think I could have written it. It just happened. And basically what my job is we do a lot of preparation so that completely spontaneous things can happen, and then we can broadcast it to you. Thanks. Any further questions from anybody? Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry. I didn't realize. Just the microphone. Yeah, hi.
Hi. So I was wondering, when are your children going to read your book?
I'm sorry, say again?
When are your children going to read your book?
My children do not get to read my book until they're 28. Well, there's 18 for the sex, and then there's another 10 years for the parental embarrassment. Although, I do want to say, you'll notice it's the Book of Vice, subtitled Very Naughty Things and How to Do Them. It used to be Very Bad Things and How to Do Them. But my daughter, Rosie, who was at the time 8, said, how about naughty? Naughty sounds better. So, and lo, it does. So it's Very Naughty Things. So it's the first time in the world that the subtitle of the book has been provided by somebody who is not allowed to read it. It is actually a little terrifying that someday they're going to read this book. And I have friends who are authors who have written much more, even than this, confessional and dirty books. And I talk to them about it, and they just say, it's awful. So I'm looking forward to it. Yes?
You had the tagline about that you always have that feeling that other people are having more fun.
Yes.
At the end of the day, did you get the impression that these people were having more fun, enjoying themselves more?
It depends. And I talk about this at the end of the book, that I ended up, first of all, I didn't end up condemning anybody. I don't think there's anything wrong with anybody that anybody does to pursue their own pleasures, as long as they don't hurt anybody. But these people were always, there is no escaping from yourself. To quote the important movie, The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai, which I have a feeling was released before many of you were born, wherever you go, there you are. And it does, and whatever you carry with you in terms of your unhappiness, dissatisfaction, yearning, you're going to take that with you. It will never be solved. I mean, look at Rick and Rachel, Ross and Rachel, who run the Swingers Club. They are constantly looking for new people to expand it. I mean, they're having more sex than anybody I've ever met in my life, and yet they still want more new people, more this, more that. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, you might think there's Grant Achatz, who has won every conceivable award. He was named, his restaurant was named Best Restaurant in America by Gourmet. He just won the James Beard Award for Best Chef. And he is like an insane man. He won't stop. He's going to get up tomorrow morning and start worrying about his next big thing. And so I admire them all for pursuing, but I don't think there's any solution to it. I don't think there's ever anybody in the world who ever says, I have enough, and now I will stop. I don't know if that's what you asked, but that's what I answered.
Are there any activities that you wanted to do but weren't actually able to either research or just didn't end up making it into the book?
There are a lot of them, actually. And I mean, I have enough ideas for a sequel. I mean, and there are some that I wanted to do, I wanted to write about but couldn't do. For example, I mean, I would have loved to do a chapter on prostitution, because how does that work? I have no idea. But obviously, I didn't want to get into that in such a way that I could write about it. There are whole areas, as you guys know here, because some of the founding members of your community do these things. I would have loved to get a ride in a private submarine, which the Paul Allens of the world are now buying. I would have loved to get into certain arcane areas of indulgence that I just didn't have access to. Maybe I'll write a sequel, but I don't know. But I think there are a lot of things. There's so many things going on, most of which you can Google. I mean, I actually had this idea that I didn't put in the book, that I would try to come up with the most arcane sexual and lifestyle fetishes that I could think of, and try to make them up and then Google it to see if I could come up with something that couldn't actually exist. And I wasn't able to do it. You know, I mean, there are whatever you can think of. There's a community out there, you know, with a Google group that they're talking about it. You know, for example, Harry Shearer, who I know vaguely, wrote a novel. But in the novel, there are these people, this subcommunity of people who like to wear diapers, and they have conventions. They're adults, obviously, and they like to be big babies, and they like to put on diapers and walk around in diapers all day. And he didn't make that up. There are people who like that. And that's not something I particularly wanted to try. But it does indicate the great universe of stuff that's out there.
Thanks. I was so the guests on Wait
Yes.
always seem very conversant and pretty much wonderful and funny. Do you have any favorite disaster stories of some guests that have just gone horribly wrong?
Oddly enough, we have been very lucky. As you know, we have these special celebrity guests. And by virtue of good fortune, and I think now, these days, these latter few years, self-selection, I mean, people don't want to be in the show unless they know what it is and are willing to go along with it. We've never had a really bad experience, with one exception. And this was so awful that I think that he absorbed all of our bad karma, and we've been relatively lucky ever since. And that one exception was Gene Simmons, formerly of Kiss. This was many years ago. This was I want to say 2002. Before or after Terry Gross? This is actually interesting. I was just asked before or after Terry Gross, and I'll get to that in a second. What happened was he had written a book. I think it was called Kiss and Make Up. and he had a very interesting life story, Gene Simmons, because he was born in Israel, came to America as a young man, and he was a yeshiva student. He was a good Jew, and he was going to go into the yeshiva, and then he discovered rock and roll, and he started KISS, right? And it was a really fascinating story, and he seemed like a really intelligent, educated guy, and so we assumed that there'd be a level of irony. And when I spoke to him on the phone, he seemed very pleasant and easygoing and not difficult. In fact, I asked him this question. And I warn you, this story will end up with an unpleasant phrase, so be prepared. And I asked him the question, I said, God, I wish I knew you were Jewish when I was growing up, because I needed some cool Jewish role models. All I had is Woody Allen and all these Nebuchadnezzar guys. And he's like, well, what about Jesus? What about Moses? They're cool Jewish guys. I was like, yeah, okay. We talked, and he seemed game. He came on the show and was the biggest asshole you could possibly imagine. Everything he said was intended to provoke about his own ego and his sexual conquests and his contempt for us. It was so awful. And I did not know how to deal with this. And our show is not confrontational, and our ethos is let's make everybody sound good and have a good time. And I was desperate because everything he said, there was just this horrible silence as our panelists were just stared at the floor. And this time we were doing the show, it was before we moved to a live audience, so we were doing it in a studio, and my producers are like throwing their hands up in the air, what can we broadcast from this? And I remembered. I said, oh my God, I said that thing about Jewish role models, and he gave me an answer that wasn't the most funny thing in the world, but at least it was decent. It was a human thing to say. So I said it again. Now we're on the radio. Now we're recording. We're not live. Thank you, God. I said, so, Gene, I really wish I knew that you were Jewish back when I was growing up, because I could have used a better role model, because all we had was Nebuchadnezzar guys like Woody Allen. And he said, yeah, I'm a kike. Bingo. That was Gene Simmons. Oh. And I realized later that he basically had become rich catering to assholes. That was his audience, jerks, and therefore he had an obligation to become one. You asked about Terry Gross. He just went on Terry Gross, did his famous interview with Terry Gross. That became famous because he tried the same approach, provocative, ugly, awful, offensive, insulting. But Terry, unlike me, went back at him and said, basically called him on being a jerk, and they got into it. And at one point, Gene Simmons was insulting NPR. You people at NPR are so boring and awful and stupid, and I don't know anybody would ever listen to you. And Terry challenged him, said, have you ever listened to NPR? And of course the answer is no, but his reptilian brain word. And he said, I was on it once. And he said, and the DJ said to me, why, Gene Simmons, why are you talking to me? Right now I'm imitating Gene Simmons imitating me. And he went on to discuss how boring and awful and stilted I was. So I have been insulted by Gene Simmons on The Fresh Air, which I think is a badge of honor. So thank you very much. Everybody else has been a sweetheart.
Well, I'm not sure how anything could follow that story, but I was actually going to ask the inverse question.
The what question?
The inverse question of, are there any celebrity guests that you've had who really did so well that it was sort of, at the level of like the Clippy incident where you were all just
We've had
clicking?
Are there any guests who've been so well that it's like the Clippy incident? We've had an awful lot of fun. Sometimes the most fun we have is when somebody comes on our show who is not known for being funny or charming or spontaneous and reveals themselves to be that. Our great example that I've used for years, although there are many others, is Madeleine Albright. Were you anticipating this? Madeleine Albright came on our show. She was rather one of the more prominent people we had had to that point. And we were talking to her, and I said, Madeleine Albright, I understand you have a hobby that you're a weightlifter. This is true. And she said, yes, I can press 250 pounds with my legs. And I said, oh. I said, well, that's a useful skill in diplomatic circles. And she said, yes, it's good for kicking ass. and then there are the moments that was great. And we're like, good. And since then, she's gone on all like the comedy shows like Jon Stewart. And she was on back. I said, we started your career as a comedian. She said, you're right. And sometimes there are the spontaneous moments where, Orrin Hatch was on the show, Senator Orrin Hatch, and we were talking to him about his background. It turns out he's from Pittsburgh, not Utah, but he remains a huge fan of the Pittsburgh sports teams, the Steelers and the Pirates. And I said, "Oh, I didn't realize that you're a big sports fan." He said, "Yes." He said, "I am an athletic supporter." But we've had great times. I mean, Tom Hanks was in the show and was like a delight and charming. And he said to me at one point, I'd asked him some question. And he answered a question. I said, "No, you're wrong." And he said, "God damn you to hell, Peter Sagal." Which, oh my God, it's Woody God damning me to hell. It was a great moment. But no, one of the great pleasures about my life is I get to interview these guests, and they tend to have a really good time. And that's really fun. And that sort of becomes infective, and they often ask to come back. And it's just great. Thank you.
First of all, I need to thank you on behalf of my partner for mentioning his discovery on your show, even though you made fun of it, which is his discovery of the 2 moons of Uranus, which was, I think Adam Felber laughed about it.
Yes. Other shows at NPR handle international relations.
But
we do bathroom humor. Yes.
But my actual question was, I know from having been to several tapings that the actual taping is about 2 hours.
Yes.
When you do the podcast, is there any thought of you ever doing an unedited version rather than...
People have asked me that, particularly people who have come to see the live shows, and they come up and they say, "That was so much fun, everything that you did. Why don't you broadcast all of it in some form?" And my answer is, first of all, not everything, but a lot of the stuff we cut out simply doesn't meet NPR, FCC standards. And I will tell you...
That's why it's for the podcast.
Yeah, well, you make a good point. But the other reason is, look, we're asking people to pay sometimes upwards of $65 or $70, depending on where we are, to come and see something or hear something they can hear for free in the weekend in their pajamas. So we might as well maintain an incentive to come down. So, but actually, to be more serious, NPR as a corporation has standards about what it broadcasts in any form, and I don't think would allow us to get away with a lot of stuff we do in the live show. So I encourage you all to come see us live if you can, and you will hear even more tasteless poop jokes, I promise.
So that is all the time we have today. I'd like to thank Mr. Sagal for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you guys for having me. A real pleasure.